Hi, this is Seth Fleishman with World History by a Jew. I'm coming to you tonight for not a lecture, but a bit of a conversation. I'm reaching the point where it's time to choose a new series. So those of you who've been watching my channel for a while know that first I did the Egypt series with a couple interruptions for math. And then I did the Bronze Age Collapse series, and we still have a couple more lectures, Bronze Age Collapse. I'm not quite finished yet, but we're now starting that point where I have to think about what am I going to do next. So I'm going to reach out to all of you and ask you to help me along in my thought process. So first, I'm going to start off by showing you what I've done. So most of my time doing lectures were actually in-person lectures at synagogues and other organizations. I've spoken at a convention. I've gone to do a few weekend events at various shuls, but primarily my speaking has been at the synagogue that started all Chabad of Toku Hills in Atlanta. So all the lectures have been there, along with a few others. The more popular ones have been in other locations as well. So I'm starting off here on this first screen to show you what I've done. And while on the YouTube channel, it's been all antiquity, you can see I've done a range of topics from both time and place all over the world, particularly the Middle East and Western world. You see there's a decent selection. So take a second to look at the list, and then we're going to jump to YouTube. So here's the 3 YouTube series I've done. We started off with ancient Egypt, and I interrupted that with a couple math lectures. I don't know if you can call that a series, but at least it's a 2-part series. And then lately we've been doing Bronze Age Collapse. And as I said in the beginning, we've got a couple lectures left, but we're nearing the end of it. So now I'm coming to you. Here it is, Decision 2020, except this was a little bit more fun than the real one, I think for most of us anyway. So let's take a look at what the options are. Now, these options all came from you. I'll say that the requests I get from the people on my email list are a little bit more varied than the requests I get through YouTube. And a lot of that is a function of my current YouTube lectures being in antiquity. That means the people watching have been fans of antiquity, so they're requesting other topics from antiquity. People on my email list, or a lot of that list, are people who've seen me speak live in person, and they know I've done a range of topics. So you'll see most of the topics are towards antiquity or the Middle Ages, but there are a few more modern topics that I've gotten requests from my longtime viewers. So let's take a look. I'm going to try not to give away too much by what people are requesting or what I think people are going to select or which one's being asked the most, because I want you to be able to choose freely without any preconceived notions as to where I'm going. Lecture 1, or option 1, I should say, ancient Mesopotamia. So this would be the taking what I did with Egypt and jumping across to the other side of modern Israel and now doing ancient Mesopotamia. So like I did with Egypt, I'd start off at the beginning, long before there were Jews. So we'd start off with Sumer and Akkad and Sargon's empire. I'd talk about the Babylonian Empire and Hammurabi. I have done a couple lectures on that, but this would be taking it to a whole new level. I would go over the great archaeological discoveries in Iraq like I did with Egypt. I'd talk about Mesopotamian religion and then how this ties into the Jewish religion. I'll talk about Abraham and where I see his place in the archaeological record. And then we talk about the roots of Jewish culture, what we know from Jewish history and Jewish culture, where they're linked to Mesopotamian history. Option 2, the first Jewish state. So those of you following the Bronze Age collapse know that I've taken us now well into the period of the Judges. So the next step would be move forward in terms of Jewish history would be to move forward to the United Monarchy. So this is when the first Jewish state is formed, when King David comes to power, when King Solomon builds the first temple in Jerusalem. We then talk about how the 2 kingdoms split, and you had the northern kingdom of Israel versus the southern kingdom of Judah. And then I would talk about some of the other powers in the area as well. So Who are the Phoenicians? Where did they come from? How are they connected to our Bronze Age collapse series even? And I'll talk briefly, not to the depth I would in the Mesopotamian series I proposed, but I would also talk about the other powers briefly, the Assyrians, for example, the Babylonians, at least from the Jewish point of view, the Babylonian Empire. So I would branch out a bit. So let's look at the next option. Now, the next option is the Roman Empire. So this is really taking what the Jewish world was like in the time of the Romans. And I would start off from the beginning, how Rome came to be Rome, even though no one's going to claim Jews were involved in that period of time. And I would talk about the transition from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire. I would talk about the big Jewish connection being the Roman invasion of Judea. In fact, we talk about really the two primary wars of the Jews versus the Romans. And then, of course, after the Bar Kokhba revolt and the diaspora really is going at that point. It really started before, but at that point, the diaspora was really going. So we don't have the Jews dispersing throughout the world, particularly the Western world. I'll talk about Jews in the Roman world, what it was like living in the empire. And then I'd switch back to the history of the Roman Empire to talk about the decline and fall, to use Gibbon's terms, of how the Roman Empire really came to an end. This would then lead to option 4. Now, you'll see I'm going in consecutive order here. So the next idea in my head was maybe we should start off with the fall of Rome. So Rome's ended, and let's jump right into the beginnings of Europe. And the founder of Europe is, of course, Charlemagne. So I would talk about Charlemagne's empire. But even in those earliest days, Jews were involved. So the Rodanites were the traders extraordinaire during this early European period, and the Rodanites were Jews, and so they were traveling the world, keeping during the Dark Ages even to keep the world economy moving. And this would then be the start to Ashkenazi Judaism. So you've got two main branches of Judaism in the world today. You have the Ashkenazi, who are from Europe, except for Spain, but the Ashkenazi Jews from Europe, and then you have the Sephardi Jews from Spain. Sephardi actually means Spain, but it's come to mean Jews from North Africa or the Middle East as well. So early European history means talking about Ashkenazi Judaism. And then we talk about the earliest days of France and Germany. This would actually be long before Germany was a country, but I think I can at least get us up to where France starts becoming somewhat of France. And then the Holy Roman Empire is Germany. And so this is Germany before it was Germany. If you're a European history fan, this would really take you back to the beginning. Now, if you want to jump forward a little bit more to great kings of Europe, then you would choose option 5, which is Europe in the 1500s. There was, at this particular point in time, you had probably the 4, at least as a combination, the 4 greatest kings who ever ruled and on the European stage together. There may have been individuals at different times, but I don't think there were any other time you had these 4 great characters at once. So this would be covering, again, the Holy Roman Empire, which becomes Germany, but also France and England, and the Turks. So Turkey during the 1500s. We'd really be hitting Spain we hear the sun never sets as an expression of the British Empire, but the expression really first came from the Spanish Empire. This was when the Spanish Empire was at its peak. But the Jews were operating in and out of all these countries, and there's this great interconnectedness amongst the Jews, both as in religion, as in the mercantile world, and also in the courts. So I would spend some extra time talking about some specific Jews that were very involved in high politics at this era. Now I'm going to jump across the Atlantic. So option 6 is the American Revolution. And I would start off with colonial America. I have done some in-person lectures talking about the earliest days of the colonization of the Americas and Jews who were involved in those earliest days, but this was kind of take it on. So we would start off with this, and I would cover Jews first coming to the New World, but really I want to focus more on the American Revolution, how Jews were involved in the revolution, but from a secular point of view, why the revolution started. Why did the 13 colonies want to declare that it was better to have liberty, it was better to have death rather than being stuck under the yoke of the Brits? So we will be talking about the politics of it and why the colonies broke free. And then we'll hit truly one of my favorite characters, and I'd still argue the greatest American ever, and that's George Washington. And we'd spend some time on George Washington, who also has a couple interesting Jewish connections as well. And then option 7, and the last option, is World War I, which I call the end of antiquity. And some of you will think I'm crazy because, of course, World War I started in 1914 of the Common Era. But really, the old world, for those of you that like antiquity, the old world really made it till 1914. The old world died on August 4th, 1914. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you should vote for this lecture series. I think you'll really enjoy it, because before World War I, you basically had kings still ruling the world. In fact, a lot of the European rulers were all cousins. And Jewish life was at this odd point where you saw these court Jews, like I was talking about in the 1500s, but they're trying to make it into this new world that's coming. But you cannot have this transition from antiquity to the modern world without chaos. And that's the Great War. So if you like the Bronze Age collapse, when the known world collapsed, well, if you want to jump forward, it happened again in 1914, where the world that all human history had known came to an end. And we would talk about the great battles in the war, but also the technological revolution that came with it. Because remember, in 1914, you still had guys on horseback with swords, really at the most sophisticated armies, leading their men into battle in this method. But at the end of this, you've got tanks and airplanes and machine guns and these high explosives and gas shells. And it's such a transition in such a short period of time. But in the end, we have this brave new world, and there's a fallout after World War I. There's a change to the world, and we're still very much living in that world. And for the Jewish connection, clearly the biggest change was the British taking over Palestine and the dominoes that would start, that would lead to the state of Israel. So it's a lot of fun to talk about this era as well. I think you can just guess just from my enthusiasm. I enjoy it, even though I'm a student of antiquity. I can tell you, as a student of antiquity, it's absolutely fascinating. And it's just because World War II has such a following, people don't pay enough attention to what happened in World War I. So those are your options. So you've got 7 options to choose from. The poll is going to be on the community tab of my YouTube channel. So if you'll go to the channel and hit that little community tab, it's going to be my first post on there, because as the subscriber base has increased, YouTube has gifted me with that tab, but I haven't used it yet. So we'll use this for our first tryout of the YouTube community tab. There's now a poll on here. There's going to be 7 options. Now I'm counting this as round 1. So unless one of these options gets a clear majority, or not a majority, let's say we have 7 options and 40% of you vote for the same thing, then maybe that would be a good enough hint. And I do have an idea of which one could get that, but I'm not going to say it here. But however, I'm assuming this is round 1, and we're going to come back. I'm going to check in with you again after this poll, and then we'll have a round 2 to decide the real winner. So please vote. I ask you to only vote once. Just want to be fair about it. So just honor system here. If you're going to vote, please vote once. Like I said, in all likelihood, there's going to be a second round anyway, so you'll get another shot. So let's see what the people who watch the most like. I look forward to seeing the results of your input. Just remember to vote.